Hi, welcome to this episode of Virtual Vitamin Z. I'm Erin, and I'm the Field Conservation Officer and Nature Centers Manager for the Detroit Zoological Society. And today I'm here outside of the Belle Nature Center with some tips and tricks for your fall garden cleanup. Now, fall is a beautiful time. As you can see, I'm sitting outside in our native prairie, and there are a lot of things happening right now. There's a lot of things in bloom. There's a lot of seed heads. And so if you are a gardener and you're a gardener that is interested in supporting wildlife in your backyard, this is a great season to actually relax a little bit. And I'm going to give you permission to not work quite so hard in your garden this time of year. So the first tip I have for you is to let some of these flowering plants, whether you're growing perennials, native plants, whatever you're growing, to let some of them stay over the winter. So one of our first inclinations is to clean up our garden beds in the fall. And with things like vegetables, that's actually really important because we don't want any diseases from this year's tomatoes and peppers and those kinds of things to be left over in our garden beds for next year when we're going to replant them. But our flower beds and our native beds are a very different story. So first of all, they are providing a lot of food, and that food comes in several different forms. So first of all, many of our insects, our native insects that are one of the most important parts of our native food chain in our backyards, they are going to overwinter in the plants, in the leaf litter, in the stems of the plants. And so just by leaving them, first of all, you're letting our insects overwinter, and they become very important food for birds and other wildlife in the spring. And secondly, those same insects are actually a food source for birds all winter long. The other thing that happens if we leave our beautiful flowers standing, you get some structure and some color in your garden in the winter. But imagine these flowers and these flowering plants in about 3 months when they're covered with snow and they have bent over. Those same plants are going to provide shelter, and the seed heads on all of these plants are going to be a really important food source for our birds. So our first tip today is to leave some of your native plants and your perennials standing, and you don't have to leave them looking shaggy if you want to clean up a little bit, but leave a couple of feet and leave some of those seed heads. All right, let's look at some other things we can do to support wildlife in our gardens. All right, so I'm still outside at the Nature Center here, and I am in our front native garden bed. We actually just planted several new native plants. And so the second tip is, if you are looking to improve your garden for wildlife, fall is a fantastic time to plant native plants. You get them in the ground right before the frost, and in some cases with seeds it doesn't matter, they can go on top of the snow even, but they're going to set their root systems, they're going to get a nice early start in the spring, and you're going to have improved your garden for wildlife by just planting native plants. So that's our second tip. And while I'm here in this bed, let's talk about leaves. We are very used to cleaning up all of the leaves in our yard because if we leave a thick layer on our lawns, they can kill the plants. And you might want that. You might want to design a new bed and let the leaves sort of manage your grass for you over the winter by sort of suffocating it. But the other thing we can think about is these leaves. So we've got some oak leaves here. There's some maple leaves in the garden next to me. These leaves in this leaf litter on the ground is really, really important as a part of our backyard ecosystem. And so it provides some insulation, it provides some shelter, it provides some habitat, it provides nutrients to the soil as the leaves break down. And we're going to come back to that idea of all of our native insects and how important they are in the food chain. And by leaving these leaves, you are keeping those native insects here. So we have native bees, we have lots of different moths and butterflies that are overwinter in the leaf litter. And so when you remove all the leaves, or you mulch them, or you burn them, or you send them to the landfill, you're actually stripping a lot of really important native pollinators from your garden and from your backyard. And again, sometimes we don't think, oh, I don't really want insects in my garden, but these are insects that are providing a tremendous food resource to the other wildlife in your yard, and they're keeping things in balance by managing other pests and diseases. And so tip number 3 then is to leave your leaves, or at least leave a patch of them. You can mulch your beds, you can mulch your vegetable beds if you're looking for a place to put them. There are lots of ways to use leaves without removing them from your landscape. All right, let's take a look at one more tip. All right, so far we've talked about leaving some of your plants standing, whether those are native perennials or other plants in your garden to provide some structure and food and habitat for the winter. We've talked about planting native plants this time of year, whether that's seeds or plugs. We've talked about leaving your leaves and perhaps using them as mulch, but not removing them from your backyard habitat and your landscape. And the fourth tip is a brush pile. Now, this is not going to be something you're probably going to want right up near your house, but if you are doing some fall gardening chores in your yard and you need to take out some limbs or branches or a tree, another tip is to create a brush pile, and it can be kind of out of sight. On the edge of your property or near a bird feeder is a great spot for it. Now, a brush pile is not necessarily the most attractive feature of your yard to humans. However, its value to wildlife is huge. This provides structure and shelter for a variety of things, particularly in the winter when it is snowing and animals like rabbits or squirrels can get down underneath the brush pile. Birds utilize the brush pile, and it will eventually decay and become part of your soil. But a brush pile is a really important piece of habitat that we can add to our yard instead of removing all of the branches from our backyards. All right, thanks for joining me today. We covered a lot. It is a beautiful fall day. I encourage you to go out and enjoy it. If you are going to do some of the fall cleanup chores that we tend to do this time of year, think about how you can improve your backyard habitat for wildlife. All right, thanks for joining me. Stay healthy, Detroit.